Okay, my name is Daniel Buckley. I'm in County Kerry, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to identify non-native alders. So I'm specifically focusing on non-native alders that are naturalizing in Ireland. So we're going to look at three species. We're going to look at Alnus incana, the grey alder, Alnus cordata, the Italian alder, and Alnus rubra, the red alder, and we're going to compare them to our native common alder. So first, can I give a little brief introduction to the ecology of these different species? First, we look at the common alder, black alder, Alnus glutinosa. It's quite widespread in Europe. Goes into Russia, down into the Balkan Peninsula, into Italy, doesn't go too far into the Mediterranean, into Iberia. It's mostly northerly there, and doesn't go very, very far north into Scandinavia. It's a species, it's very widespread in Britain and Ireland, as you can see from the BSBI maps there. It's a species of wetlands, of rivers, of lakes, form this old woodland type called aldercar. And it's just an example of one of the best examples of aldercar in Ireland in Clyde National Park. So the first non-native alder we're talking about is the grey alder, Alnus incana. It's a species that's found in Europe and Eurasia and North America. And there's about 4 subspecies. Within Europe, it's principally kind of Eastern Europe, Northern Europe. In Central Europe, it's found in the mountains. You could generally call it a mountain alder, where it kind of replaces Alnus glutinosa at higher altitudes and higher latitudes. Again, similar ecology to common alder, found along riverbanks and wet areas and swamps. It's the most common of the non-native alders you come across in Britain and Ireland, as you can see from the map there. Then moving on to the Italian alder, this has got a very restricted distribution. In Europe, its native range is Corsica and Italy, and it's widely planted. It's thought to be in its native range. Is thought to be its native range is thought to be kind of a relic from the tertiary period, and it's, as you can see from the BSBI records, scattered throughout Ireland. Many more records from Britain, but I suspect that's for a survey effort more than reality. And then finally, we're going to talk with the red alder, which its native range is in the western United States, from Alaska down to California. It's similar ecology to the common alder found along riverbanks. It's a pioneer species that's replaced by Sitka spruce in the northern part of its range. So it's generally kind of considered a pioneer species, and it's the rarest of the non-native alders in Ireland, Britain, and so where do you count non-native alders? Non-native plant that you can come across anywhere, but you're generally going to find them in very human-modified environments. So we're talking about street landscaping, road landscaping, and from there they will naturalize in disturbed grounds. So I've come across these species naturalizing on abandoned building sites. You've got 2 examples here, one in Kerry and one in Dublin. And so yeah, if you get trees planted and you get disturbance nearby, because they've got very tiny wind dispersed seeds, they can naturalize quite readily. So in terms of the literature to help you identify Alnus, we'll go through a couple of them here. The Vegetative Key to British Flora by John Poland and Eric Clement is excellent, and it has a kind of a key that you go through. Just goes into good detail in terms of the twigs, the buds, the leaves, the bark. It's excellent, really, you know. Then John Poland also has the field key to winter twigs. Again, so you can go through a key that goes into good detail about the buds and twigs of these trees, and it has very good pencil drawings as well, so that'll help you identify these species. For beginners, the Collins Tree Guide is excellent. I find it's kind of written in layman's terms, and kind of gives a good overview of the key identification features. Also goes into detail about cultivars of some of these species as well, which is quite interesting. And of course, you couldn't talk about our Irish flora without talking about Webb's Irish flora. And Webb's just goes into good detail. There's a key based on the leaves but it only covers 3 species, glutinosa, incana, and cordata. It doesn't cover Alders rubra, unfortunately. But you can see there it kind of goes into details about the color of the bark and catkins and things like that, and gives a bit of description about the habitat you might find in them as well. So when we're looking, so I'm going to go through the kind of key features to separate the species out now. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the general appearance of these species, or the jizz, to borrow a birding term. Alders have a kind of a common kind of unifying kind of growth pattern, in that they're kind of compact in shape. But with Alders glutinosa, when you're looking at it from a distance, it can be quite dark, dark looking, and the outer branches can be quite purplish. And what I also notice in comparison to the other 3 species is the outer branches are much more chaotic. With Alders incana, it's got a much lighter appearance than Alders glutinosa. It's got quite a grey appearance, actually. But one of the kind of key features for identifying Alders incana is its habit of suckering. And you can see in the second picture, you can see at the base of the tree, all the suckers coming up from the ground. And this is the only non-native alder in Ireland, and the alder in Ireland that does this. So it's a very useful identification feature for the species. Alders cordata, the Italian alder, I find this species looks like a conifer. If you look at it from, it looks like a deciduous conifer. It's got that cone shape, kind of compact cone shape, which you can clearly see in the photograph there. And then with Alders rubra, similar appearance to Alders cordata, but the outer branches are much more simplified, and it has a much rounder crown, and it's lighter in appearance than Alders glutinosa. So when we look at the leaves, and Alders glutinosa, it's got a kind of an obovate, rounded, quite a rounded leaf with a round base. But a key feature at the very top is this kind of indentation, and that the other species don't have. It's mildly serrated in comparison to some of the other species. When you look at Alders incana, the grey alder, the leaves are grey underneath. It's a very, very obvious feature. They're ovate in shape, and they're very obviously serrated, and in comparison to glutinosa. Alders cordata has a very different leaf to the other alder species, that the leaf base is cordate. It's again lightly serrated like Alders glutinosa, but it's been described in literature as being like a pear leaf, which is quite apt, actually. And the other thing about the leaf of Alders cordata is the leaves stay on the tree quite late into the winter. You can have leaves on Alders cordata into December. And finally, we look at Alders rubra. It's similar in design to the Alders incana. It's very obviously serrated. It's kind of doubly serrated. Slightly more lobing, I find. You can see it in that picture there, than Alders incana. It doesn't have the grey underneath like Alders incana. And I also find that the leaf venation underneath the leaf is kind of more pronounced than Alders incana. But another kind of obvious feature, if you look at the edge of the leaf, the margin is rolled under. So that's a really good key feature for Alders rubra. So then we look at the twigs and buds, and Alders glutinosa. I should add that these photographs are from John Poland. They're absolutely excellent, really good detail. But Alders glutinosa has very purplish buds, hence the very purplish hue to the outer branches when you see the tree from far away. I kind of liken the buds of Alders glutinosa to the color of sloes. They're kind of like purplish with a kind of pale hue around it, and the buds are kind of compact and oval in shape. Alders incana have kind of ovide buds as well, but the twigs and the buds are hairy, which you can see in the photograph there. Now, Alders cordata has much rounder buds than the first 2, and in the springtime, the Alders cordata buds are actually quite green, so very, very distinctive. And finally, Alders rubra has quite a much larger and oblong bud than the other species, and it's kind of pink or purplish. I always like it to lipstick in color. It's quite garish, really. You know, it's very kind of obvious feature on this species. Moving on to the cones. So for glutinosa, incana, and rubra, the cones are quite small. They'll be kind of 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeters in size. Alnus cordata has quite large cones, about 2 centimeters or more. So they're very obvious, a really good key feature for Alnus cordata when when looking at the trees in wintertime, these large cones. But glutinosa and incana have quite similar cones, but I suppose you could, the incana cones are slightly smaller and more round. And then if you look at the Alders rubra cones, they're much narrower than the other 3 species. Kind of, you know, if you could say the glutinosa, incana, and cordata have kind of pine-like cones, and rubra's kind of virgin and spruce-like cones, given how narrow they are. When we go to the bark, so Alnus glutinosa and Alnus rubra, just to go those, when these trees get old, they kind of develop these vertical plates. And glutinosa, this tree bark is covered in, I think, in lichens and algae, so it's quite light color. But actually, Alnus glutinosa has got quite a dark bark in comparison to those species, and that's why when you're looking at it from the general appearance of glutinosa, it's got quite a dark appearance in comparison to the others. With Alders incana, the bark stays smooth and grey right into old age. And then with Alders cordata, the bark is kind of like skin, like I kind of liken it to beech, in that it kind of stretches and splits and develops fissures over time. And but you can also notice speckling on the bark, a bit like the diamond speckling you get in aspen. So that's the bark. Now, they're the kind of main features you can use to identify those 3 non-native species in comparison to glutinosa. I'll just briefly mention Alnus viridis, the green alder. It's another non-native species that you might come across in Ireland. It's mentioned in Webb's Flora, but there's no records in the BSBI database for Ireland. It has been recorded in Britain. Again, it's got this kind of a Europe, Eurasia, North American range, and there's different subspecies. And I do know that one of the American subspecies, the Sitka alder, has been planted by the Forestry Commission in Britain. But to date, I haven't really seen it in Ireland. But in terms of identification, it's more of a shrub than a tree, so generally doesn't get bigger than 6 meters. And the trees can be quite reddish in comparison to the other species. But so you may come across it in Ireland. I haven't come across it, but it'd be interesting if people do come across it and record it. And then we're going to talk about, just briefly, kind of cover hybrids. So there's Clive Stace's, Chris Preston and David Pearman's hybrid flora of the British Isles, which talks about crosses between Alnus glutinosa and Alnus incana, Alnus glutinosa and Alnus cordata, and Alnus incana and Alnus cordata. And Alnus incana has been mentioned, has been recorded. The cross between Alnus incana and Alnus glutinosa has been recorded in Ireland by John Parnell and Roscommon and other places. Can be quite difficult to identify. I mean, again, with hybrids, it depends on, they can skew one way or the other, or they can be somewhere in the middle. You can just a photograph here from a paper by Bailiff and Bazant in Eastern Europe, just some photographs of the hybrid between Alnus glutinosa and Alnus incana. And you can see that they look very like common alder, but they lack some of the leaves lack the indentation at the top of the leaf, and maybe slightly more serrated. Now, a hybrid that is mentioned in these books is Alnus glutinosa ex rubra, which I've come across one tree in County Cork, and it had this kind of hybrid vigor, quite a large tree, and the leaves, I thought initially, would just look for like a very wide Alnus rubra. When you look close, you can start to see kind of common features. Now, so hybrids, I mean, as these species are planted and they start to naturalize, we may come across more hybrids. And certainly the forestry industry is interested in the hybrids because of their hybrid vigor and growing them for biomass. So the hybrids may become more common in the countryside in the future. So it's definitely worth looking at them. So that's my talk on how to identify non-native alders. I hope you found it useful. Thanks to the DSPI for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you very much.